Welcome to our discussion session, where meaningful dialogue takes center stage, free from the distractions of slideshows or videos. Let's begin this enlightening journey together as we explore our discussion for today, the joy of surrender, finding freedom in letting go and trusting God. As I write about the joy of surrender, finding freedom in letting go and trusting God, I am filled with profound gratitude and wonder. Surrender has been a transformative journey for me in the context of faith. It's a concept that initially seemed paradoxical. How can giving up control lead to joy and freedom? However, as I've delved into the depths of this idea, I've realized its profound truth. In this discussion, we will explore the concept of surrender, how it relates to finding freedom and joy, and the role of trust in our relationship with God. The foundation of surrender. Trust in God. Trust is a central theme in the Bible that underlines the concept of surrender. Proverbs 3:5-6 NIV beautifully encapsulates this idea. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This verse emphasizes that surrender begins with trust. Trust in God's wisdom, love, and ultimate plan for our lives. Trusting God is not always easy. It requires letting go of our need to control every aspect of our lives and acknowledging that His wisdom surpasses our own. It's an act of humility, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and can't see the bigger picture. Trusting God means accepting that His ways are higher than ours, even when circumstances seem confusing or painful. Surrendering our fears and anxieties. One of the most challenging aspects of surrender is letting go of our fears and anxieties. We live in a world of uncertainties, and fear often creeps in when we can't predict or control the outcomes. But God reminds us not to be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present our requests to Him. Philippians 4:6 NIV. This verse encourages us to take our concerns, fears, and worries and surrender them to God in prayer. In my journey, I've found immense comfort and strength in practicing this verse. It's a reminder that I don't have to carry the weight of my fears and anxieties alone. Surrendering them to God through prayer allows me to release the burdens I've been carrying and find freedom in trusting that God's plan is perfect. Surrendering control, a daily practice. Surrender is not a one-time event, but a daily practice. In Luke 9:23 NIV, Jesus says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." This verse highlights the importance of daily surrender to follow Jesus. It means setting aside our desires, plans, and agendas to align with God's will daily. Surrendering control over our lives can be incredibly challenging in a world that values self-sufficiency and independence. But the beauty of surrender lies in the peace it brings when we acknowledge our dependency on God. Each day we can release our grip on life's steering wheel and allow God to guide us. In doing so, we experience the joy and freedom of His leading. Surrender and the gift of freedom. When we think of surrender, we might initially associate it with a sense of loss or giving up. However, in faith, surrender is a gateway to true freedom. Galatians 5:1 NIV reminds us, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." In this context, surrender is the key to breaking free from the bonds of sin, fear, and self-reliance. When we surrender to God, we release the weight of our sins, guilt, and shame. We no longer have to carry the burdens of our past, as 1 John 1:9 NIV reassures us. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just, and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. Surrendering to God means accepting His forgiveness and embracing the freedom that comes with a clean slate. Moreover, surrender grants us freedom from the expectations and judgments of others. It frees us from the need to prove ourselves, seek validation, or strive for worldly success. When we surrender to God, we find our true identity in Him, and that realization sets us free from the endless pursuit of human approval. Surrendering in times of adversity. Surrender takes on a unique significance during times of adversity. It's easy to trust and surrender when life is smooth, but what about when facing trials and tribulations? In those moments, it's essential to remember Romans 8:28, NIV. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This verse reassures us that even in the darkest times, when we can't see the purpose or the way forward, God is working for our good. Surrendering during adversity means acknowledging that God's plan might be beyond our comprehension, but it is always for our benefit. In my own life, I've experienced the profound peace that comes from surrendering in times of adversity. It doesn't mean the pain disappears, but it means finding solace in believing God is with us, working through our trials, and ultimately leading us to a better place. The joy of surrender, a personal testimony. I can't discuss the joy of surrender without sharing my testimony. Surrender has been a transformative force in my life. It has allowed me to release my burdens, overcome my fears, and discover the freedom of living in God's grace. One of the most significant turning points in my journey of surrender was when I faced a challenging health diagnosis. It was a moment of extreme vulnerability and fear. I was tempted to despair and question why this had happened to me. But through prayer and surrender, I found peace. I surrendered my health, my fears, and my future into God's hands. I let go of the need to understand everything and trusted His plan. It was not an easy process, but I discovered a joy and peace that surpassed my understanding in that surrender. While my health condition remains a part of my life, I no longer carry it as a burden. Surrender has allowed me to find freedom during my circumstances, and the joy I have found in trusting God's plan has been immeasurable. Surrender and obedience, the ultimate act of trust. Surrender is closely tied to obedience. When we surrender, we willingly submit to God's will and trust His ways are best. In 1 Samuel 15:22 NIV, Samuel tells Saul, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams." This verse highlights that obedience is a crucial aspect of surrender. It's about relinquishing control and actively following God's commands and guidance. Obedience is the practical outworking of trust in God's wisdom and love. When we obey God, we align our actions with surrender, demonstrating our trust in His plan. This obedience, born out of surrender, leads to a deeper connection with God and a greater joy in our faith journey. Surrendering in relationships. Surrender isn't limited to our relationship with God. It also plays a vital role in our relationships with others. Ephesians 5:21 NIV encourages us to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. This verse reminds us that surrendering in our relationships reflects our surrender to Christ. Surrendering in our interactions involves humility, empathy, and a willingness to set aside our ego. It's about valuing the needs and perspectives of others, just as we value God's guidance in our lives. Doing so creates an environment of love, unity, and trust within our relationships. In my life, I've discovered that surrendering in my relationships has led to deeper connections and a greater sense of peace. It has allowed me to let go of grudges, forgive, and embrace the joy of loving and serving others. The endless joy of surrender, a question and an inspirational message. As I conclude this discussion on the joy of surrender, finding freedom in letting go and trusting God, I want to leave you with a question to ponder and an inspirational message. Question: what areas of your life do you need to surrender to God today? Is it your fears, doubts, ambitions, or relationships? Could you take a moment to reflect on where surrender can lead you to a place of joy and freedom? Inspirational message. Surrender is not a sign of weakness. It's a path to strength. It's not about giving up. It's about gaining freedom. It's not about losing control. It's about finding true purpose. The joy of surrender is a gift God offers us and a journey worth embarking on. Trust in His love. Let go of your burdens and discover the profound freedom and joy of surrendering to His perfect plan. May you find the courage to surrender, the wisdom to trust, and the joy that surpasses all understanding in your faith journey.